Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the first episode of Meet the Scientist. This webinar series is brought to you by the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center. My name is Yan Lee, and I'm both thrilled and honored to be your host today. Before we get started, I would like to invite the director of the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center, Dr. Molu, to say a few words. Dr. Molu, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everybody. On behalf of the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center in Bell Village, Mauritius, and the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center Trust Fund Board, under the chairmanship of Dr. Jayanti Noga, I myself, Dr. Aman Kumar Molu, director of this institution, would like to thank you for joining us today. As you may be aware, the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center is the center of excellence in the promotion and popularization of science and technology in the Republic of Mauritius. In view of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and sanitary protocols prevailing, like all institutions, the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center has had to review its strategy and activities to minimize face-to-face contacts and public gatherings without deviating from its mission. As such, most of the science promotion activities are regularly on various online platforms, thanks to our dedicated professional team as the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center. I encourage all of you to visit us at Bell Village in our exhibition galleries or participate in our online activities. Now, I'm very pleased this is titled Meet the Scientist. This webinar series aims to promote discussion and understanding of science and technology matters by giving you the opportunity to meet a local, Mauritian, or an international scientist in various scientific fields. You'll be able to get unique insight in their field of expertise and what they do as a scientist. And you will also be able to interact and ask questions to our guests. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to a highly interactive session on today, marine science as our theme, with our subject specialist, Dr. Bhagooli from University of Mauritius. I'm indeed very grateful to Dr. Bhagooli and the University of Mauritius for accepting our invitation. I will now pass on to our moderator, Mr. Ian Lee Kim-Tuk, who is the resource officer at the center, to carry on with the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Molu. The session of today will consist of two parts. The first part, our guest speaker will introduce you to the wonders of marine science. The second part will be a dedicated question and answer session. If at any time during the session you have questions for our resource person, I would like to invite you to click on your interface on the button question and answers marked with a Q&A and type your question, and we will come back to you afterwards. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have the immense pleasure of having with us a brilliant and passionate scientist, Associate Professor Dr. Bhagooli from the University of Mauritius. In 2018, Dr. Bhagooli was a recipient of the World Reef Award from the International Coral Reef Society in recognition of his outstanding contribution in the field of reef science and conservation. For his work, he traveled the shores of Japan, Australia, USA, and, would you believe it, Antarctica. It's just brilliant. Dr. Bhagooli, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
Hello, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you, Mr. Yan, for this very interesting introduction. And I'm very delighted to be among you here through the invitation of the director of the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center. I strongly believe that the center and the chairman of the center, and Ian and his team, have done a great job to actually, even in a difficult situation, to get us in touch. And I would today like to introduce to you the field of marine science. Just bear with me, I'll share the screen. I hope everybody can see the shared screen. Well, as mentioned earlier, I'm Ranjeet Bhagooli, and I'm from the University of Mauritius. I'm 45 years old, and I've been trained basically in biology. My first degree is in biology from the University of Mauritius, and then I moved on to a degree in marine biology. That's actually a master's of philosophy. And I also benefited the help of the Japanese government to do an MSc, Marine Masters in Science, and a PhD in Marine Environmental Sciences at the University of Ryukyu in Japan. And following that, I moved on to postdoctoral fellowship and associateship in Australia and in US. So currently, I'm an associate professor at the University of Mauritius. I usually teach a lot at the tertiary level and also conduct research activities related to marine science. Now, it's actually my passion and curiosity to discover new things about the sea, the ocean, and also how humans and the ocean can harmoniously exist and basically coexist. Now, being an islander, that is living on an island that actually is surrounded by sea, curiosity and passion is quite legitimate. So the first thing I would ask you, what do you understand by marine science? Is it biology? Is it chemistry? Is it physics? Or what it is all about? Now, if we look at the terms carefully, marine would relate to water mixed with salt, that is salt water. And it is not surprising. It's a common fact that we all know more than 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by seawater. So that's marine. And what is science? Science is actually an intellectual and practical activity that look from a methodological perspective or systematic perspective at the structure and behavior of physical objects or things in the world, and we do this through observation and proper experimentation. So marine science in a nutshell would mean, at least to me, the exploration, the discovery, and the scientific study, that is methodological study of the ocean and its associated phenomena. Generally speaking, marine science has also been referred to as oceanography, and oceanography in Greek would mean like Oceanus is the water god, and graphy means writing. Another way to look at it would be it's a kind of a branch of geography. So it's a more kind of study of the ocean. But then there is another common terminology that we use, oceanology. Logy means the study of, and here we're talking of the ocean. And it has a very broad base in terms of the scientific involvement there. One important thing about marine science is traditionally, the way we looked at it was to divide it into 4 main branches. Though they are separated, but they are interconnected. The first is the physical oceanography. Second one, first physical oceanography, it means looking at tides, the way water masses move, how the environment affects the ocean, and vice versa. Chemical oceanography deals with the water composition, the chemistry of that water and how it interacts with the atmosphere and it changes. We have marine geology. Actually, it looks at the earth structure beneath the water and how things have changed over millions of years. And fourthly is the marine ecology and biology. Many people refer to this as the biological oceanography aspect. Here we're looking at living things in the water column, on the sea floor, and how they interact with the environment. So those were the 4 kind of traditionally classified groups for marine science. It's good to look at the history a bit. So historically, marine science was actually mostly focused on mapping the ocean. For example, on your left here, you have the map of the Gulf Stream produced back in the 1770s. And those were mostly for navigational purposes and other trade purposes. And then came in the 1870s, where we had the first marine expedition, research expedition, to look at what is out in the sea. Because previously they were just looking at the map, and whenever fishermen will bring things up to the surface from the deep ocean, they'll just look at the fish. But this was the first challenge. This is why it was called Challenger. First challenge to look at what is in the water. And that was the first global marine expedition led by the British. And then slowly, of course, it evolved. And this is what marine science looked like today. We try to understand the coastal sea, which is close to the land, and we go further to it. In the oceanic waters, we'll look at how it interacts with the sea surface, how it interacts with the water column and the sea floor. What is it that we have in the water column, like the biological aspects, the plankton, the bacteria, and how it is linked to the chemical aspects. And we also have, you know, some weird organisms living in the water column, like the giant squid, you can see, and how they interact with the water column. The wind and the coastal activity, how it shapes the coastal environment. We also look at the earth crust, that is the sea floor, how it is connected to things happening inside the crust that is linked to the water and connected to the atmosphere. For instance, here you can see we have hydrothermal vents that release heat, and the water can go up to like 600 degrees Celsius in some places, but still there are lives occurring there. There is hydrothermal bacteria, and we have explored and used them. And then there is also movement of the seafloor that we study, and how it can create earthquakes and then tsunamis, and how we can, once we understand how tsunamis are formed, we may predict them. Once we predict them, we may take appropriate actions and save lives and ecosystems as well. So in other words, marine science today, in the modern world of technology, is a multidisciplinary science. It involves observation, experimentation, and modeling. It is beyond just biology, chemistry, and physics. It looks at all processes and their interconnection. So I hope I've cleared to you what marine science stands for today. But what am I passionate about marine science? And maybe you should ask yourself, what are you passionate about marine science? My main focus is, traditionally speaking, the fourth aspect, the marine biology and ecology, or biological oceanography aspect. And I set sail on this adventure more than 25 years ago. I tended to believe that life is either a great adventure or nothing. And also, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So my first choice to embark on marine biology was at the master's degree level, though I did a project on fish during my undergraduate level. And for my master's, I studied corals. I'm very grateful to my mentor at the time, who introduced me to the marine world. Another slide here to show you what the marine biology and ecology is all about. So if we start from the middle part here, as an organism, I can take myself as an individual organism. You can see below it, we have different levels. We start from atoms to molecules, molecules regrouping to form, small compartments called organelles that can be grouped together to produce a cell, to form a cell. Different cells can be grouped together to form a tissue, and different tissues can form an organ. If you put together different organs, it forms the organ system. And when the organ systems interact, produce the organism. And everything that falls within these areas will call them biology, study of the living organisms. And then ecology on the right, as you can see, it goes beyond the individual level. So how that individual group form groups, and how that group within a particular species and interact with the environment, that will be population level studies. Then how that assemblage of different populations that can form a community interact with the environment. And then different communities interacting with the environment, be it with a biological or non-biological aspects of the environment, that will form the ecosystem. And when you put together the ecosystems, that will give you the biosphere. This is where life exists on Earth. So these are the different levels of organization, and this is what we study in marine biology and ecology. Now, you must be thinking that all these marine scientists, they sit in the lab, they sit in the classroom, like this one here, we sit in the classroom, looking at theoretical aspects. We sit in the lab, these are my PhD students, running an experiment at Diponegoro University in Indonesia. And we have corals being exposed to different environmental conditions. So it can be fun working in the lab as well, but maybe you're thinking it's too boring. Oh, here, we've collected data from the deep sea, like 600 meters. All the videos have been produced by remotely operated vehicles, and then those videos are analyzed in a lab. And you must be wondering where this lab maybe. This is in Norway, the Institute of Marine Research. We have a colleague and my PhD student as well with me here, and this is a marine scientist from Seychelles, and we're analyzing stuff that we've looked at jointly on the ship. 1 month spent on the ship, producing megabytes, terabytes of data and being analyzed in the lab. Or maybe, you may be thinking that you're sitting in the office and you're getting a lot of data. The pictures that you see here, the map showing you the Western Indian Ocean. This is Mauritius, Réunion Island, and this is Saya de Mala and Nazareth Bank, just east of Madagascar. What we can do from the office in marine science is take satellite collected data through modeling processes. And this one is showing you chlorophyll A distribution in the waters of the ocean. And the colors, these are false colors that we use to represent the different levels of chlorophyll in milligram per meter cube. You can see the red color means high level of chlorophyll, and the white part is very low level of chlorophyll. So we can see levels of chlorophyll and photosynthetic activities taking, and thus productivity of the ocean, and how they can vary from month to month. Basically, it gives us an idea on Mauritius, on Réunion Island, and on the side of Mala and Nazareth Bank, productivity is quite high and comparable to the coast of Madagascar and the Mozambique Channel. So this way, we can make lots of inferences from just using remotely collected data through satellite and make interesting observations and analysis for policymaking, conservation activities, and exploration and use of marine resources in a sustainable way. Now, you can go beyond the four walls of the classroom. So this is myself on a ship, on a small boat going to an island in the, I think this is on the Karimunjaw Islands in Indonesia, and going for field surveys. And these are my students at Fick and Flag. We're trying to get into water to do some surveys. These guys are students actually doing marine survey, everyone looking underwater. No one is looking at the sky because there's so many interesting things to see and experience underwater. And this is at Flat Island. Well, you sometimes have to go deeper, and this will require you to dive, like to take scuba diving. And this is a dive that I did at Ishigaki Island in the Marine Park of Japan, which is quite north of Taiwan, doing some surveys and collections. But then you can also have fun. You observe these animals that move around a lot. And this is a sea turtle. And this observation has been made in Malaysia. So you can see, you may go to the field, but not only in Mauritius, but all around the world to collect samples and do your study. So you can be on a ship, you can be snorkeling, you can be diving. So it's more fun, at least to me. I enjoy both being in the lab and in the field. Just being in the field, maybe it can get boring sometimes. Just being in the lab can be very boring. But if you make a good mix of it, you will enjoy marine science studies. Now, when we talk in the labs, what sort of results can we generate? What sort of sense can we bring forward for people who are interested in this subject and people who use the results for decision making and advancement of society? On the top left, you will see this is kind of histology. Corals. I'm a lover of coral reef. Of course, I'll show you most of the examples from coral reef. This is an example of a coral larva, and this is like 300 micron in size that are released in the water column, and they find a suitable place and they build into the coral. This is observed under scanning electron microscopy, and this is outside observation. You can see it is surrounded by cilia all around it, and then this is a cross section of it. These are algae living in it that produces photosynthate, that is food, and give them to the animal that actually is hosting it. So it's also a combination of animals and microalgae. And these, as you can see, these are amoeboid cells that help it to develop. These are developmental biology matters. But then we can go to the corals themselves. This is a species that we think it's new to our waters, and we call it Stylophora madagascarensis, found only around Madagascar, but it has ended up in our waters. And we've done, this skeletal structure study using scanning electron microscopy and doing genetic work where we extract the DNA from the animal and from the algae, and we analyze it to see whether these are same species or not. Interestingly, the animal DNA shows us in red here. This is Stylophora madagascarensis from Madagascar that we got from our collaborators from Belgium. And these green samples are from Mauritius, these ones. And these results actually show that they are same, 99% same. So our samples most probably will be very close to Stylophora madagascarensis, if not the same, exactly same. And this data actually here shows you the algae DNA analysis. And the Stylophora that we had shows us a separate group of algae that lives inside it. We call it clade D. And now they have some specific names given to them. I work with a team in Pennsylvania, in USA, and they help us do all these advanced analysis. So it's not only my work. I'm a marine scientist. I know corals. I know it's very limited knowledge, just corals. It sounds like I know only corals, but there's so many things to research on corals. And the more we research, the more questions we get. And without these international collaborations from Belgium, from USA, not much is possible in an isolated way of doing research. So collaboration, opening minds, merging minds, and shifting understanding is important. So coral reefs. This is a picture taken from Belmar. As you can see, we have the corals here. The brownish are healthy corals, and some are dead here, but then lots of fish all around it. Then we have a massive coral. These are branching corals, and these are massive corals. This is almost 1 meter and 70 centimeter in height, this coral. So apart from some of these hard structures, we also study other organisms associated with coral reef, like the giant clam, Bhagooli benichi in Mauritius, the phytoplankton, microscopic microalgae that lives in the water column that we can't see with our eyes, only under microscope we can see that. Sea urchins, there are so many varieties, the macroalgae, these are solitary corals, and sponges. Maybe you have heard of the use of sponges in medicinal research. And this slide shows us at Belmar what has happened in November 2014. What corals have done, they have released massively the eggs and sperms that form this reddish slick, as you can see, that can reach also the sand and the rocks near the coast. Now, this is a time where we have to be very careful with our water quality so that we can allow corals to reproduce properly, produce these planula, and then reproduce new coral colonies that can build reefs. So this is also what we study, and we have specific timing for that. But one of the main subject of study for me is coral bleaching, which is a global phenomenon. As you can see, the brownish corals have lost their color. They've become white. Why? They have lost the microalgae that gives them that yellow-brown color, that produce food for them. Because when temperature go up, they cannot photosynthesize and they are kicked out of the animal. Animal is like the landlord, the algae is like the tenant. If the tenant doesn't pay the rent, they get kicked out. If they don't provide food, they're out. But then This is happening all around the world where we have coral reefs, and Mauritius is not an exception. This is an event taking place in 2019. But then we have hope. At Belmar, what we've seen, the bleach corals like this, they recover with time. Only if the water quality becomes favorable again, that is, temperature go down, and the composition of the water is favorable for the association to be rebuilt. This is an example. Bleaching observed and recovery. This is in March, and this is in August, same year, at Belmar. Same thing. In Belmar, we have recovery taking place. As you can see, we have our point of reference here. These were bleach, they recovered. This guy didn't bleach, but they stay same. They're growing slowly but surely. Now I'll show you a video of coral bleaching in 2016 at Belmar. As you can see here, the whitish corals are not dead corals. They're still alive. The animal is there. It's only the algae that has left them. So you can see these are dead parts, but these are live parts, all the whitish thing. It's like underwater snow when you get into water, when these massive bleaching events happen. Many people tend to panic when they see these things. Well, these are global phenomena. They are beyond our control. They are linked to increasing global temperature. But then what we can do at our level is to keep the water quality as good as possible so that they can recover and regain their color, regain their food, and thus sustain. As you can see, there are lots of fish residing here. And these are protective fish. They protect the corals from predators. They hide underneath in the understory of the corals. And this is why you see algae growing there, the brownish thing. This algae. It's like the coral gardeners. So this is also a type of symbiosis external to the coral. So if I will go very close to the fish will tend to chase me out. And of course, they tend to bite us. So you see the fish species are still around, though the corals have temporary bleach. This is one of our ex-PhD students. He already graduated now, but helping out with the studies of coral bleaching. So just to show you the extent of bleaching that can happen, but not all of them will die. We got like more than 70% of these corals that recovered. And scientists think today that bleaching is a window for adaptation, for evolution to take place. The algae that is not stable are kicked out, and new algae are acquired that are adapted to the environmental condition. And thus, this explains why corals have existed for more than 500 million years. They have the ability to adapt to new situations. This is a beautiful school of fish that roams around in the coral reef area. And they feed also on the algae and maintain the ecosystem as well. So just to show you, and the pinkish color that you see here is the pigment of the animal host, not of the algae. As you can see here, we have a lot of bleaching that has taken place, but the fish are still around. The ecosystem is physically intact. It's just physiologically have to adjust. And these are coral robots. So if the branching corals die, they break off and they start degrading. And this is what forms the sand. So basically, this is what happened in 2016. Let's take a look of what is the situation in July 2020 at the same site. You can see lots of dead sand, but lots of small brown corals on top of them. So new larvae has settled like these ones. And have grown into juveniles like the tabular corals, small tabular corals that you see. We'll see some more. These are juvenile corals that have grown on the dead stem of the coral. And then this is a close-up look of recruits, the larvae that have settled there, and it is coming back. So again, if you have a mass mortality following a massive bleaching event, again, panicking is not going to help. We need to maintain the water quality favorable so that these corals will naturally reproduce and bring back the coral reef again. So as you can see, lots and lots of corals have come back, and some are so beautiful still. And the fish species are still around. Usually the structure have to take like 10 years or so, a decade or so to get degraded. And once they're degraded, they become sand, then there are less places to be colonized by the larvae, and thus we need artificial structures to be put out there and to let the coral settle, bring back the reef. Right now, the situation is not that bad. For example, for instance, at Belmar, and the situation is coming back because we are good at maintaining the water quality, as you can see in this picture, in this video. So these are table corals, we call them. So there are different forms. Why? The different forms are because of different species of corals, and they provide different shelter for different species to live. And because of the different topography they produce, we call the coral reefs the rainforest of the sea, the underwater rainforest. We have more than 150 species of corals in Mauritius, more than 300 species of fish that may live in those environment. And this, the diversity is huge. And there are associated organisms, like I showed to you, giant clams, plankton, sea urchins, other associated organisms that live here. And this sort of unique environment, some people, or the fish, the school of fish, they are here as well. So I think the reef, after a disturbance, they do come back to what they used to be. We just have to be patient and maintain the environment for them to be back. There are so many different fish schools out there. It is not only unique, but beautiful to there. Lots of tourists come there. And they are living in harmony, as you can see. This is a different surgeon fish species. As you can see, this is the white, the yellowish with black bands are actually another surgeon fish. So, and this is also, sorry, another fish that is common in the field. It's called surgeon fish, or surgeon. So there is a mix of branching tabula, and these produce the topography for different species to inhabit the space there. So this is what we call rugosity of a reef. The more rugose a reef is, the more biodiverse it may be. And the more biodiversity you have, the more resilience, that is the potential to come back after a disturbance. So we need to maintain the biodiversity on our reefs. So, well, what if a coral reef is damaged and we are not having enough recruit to make it come back? Then we intervene. We have science intervention, human intervention. And this is one example where we tried to test the transplantation process of corals at Belmar itself, put them on these hard concrete blocks, deploy them at sea, and see how they grow. As you can see, we have different processes, and this is how the corals are being monitored. This is an experiment funded by the University of Mauritius, and also I have other collaborators from our faculty working on this. And what we have here is data loggers to measure the temperature and light every 15 minutes. And over the years, we can monitor what's happening out there. And this is an example of how the corals have grown from October 2014 to January 2015. And interestingly, in some places you have these sea urchins, and these are grazers. They clean the concrete blocks free of charge. No, it is an ecosystem service that they're providing to their own ecosystem, cleaning It's also consuming that. So there are biological processes taking place there. And then we have problems as well. Nothing is perfect. Some will break off. Some will be maintained by snails here. Algae will grow where you have these coral gardeners. The algae will grow and will kill these transplanted corals. And these are some of the successful stories where branching of these single axial corals start occurring within a year from 2014 to 2015. That's good news. They grow first vertically and then they form branches laterally. And some of the results on the reef, what we found because of the gardeners, the algae overgrow the corals and kill the corals. And they survive bleaching events as well, the survivors. In the lagoon, this is what we got. We got interesting corals that grew up to this size from these tiny bits, microfragments, and the branching patterns have been followed. Near the coast also, this is kind of more than 4 years old corals that we have transplanted at the same location. So we can actually rebuild some of the corals and rehabilitate reefs. I'm not saying restoring them exactly at the same point they were previously, but just bringing the services they provide, because we have sea urchins, fish, and so many other things that will help them grow. Another interesting project that we have that we work on at sea, and I'm sure you will be amazed about it, are the dolphins, one of the most intelligent mammals living in our waters. This is from Rivière Noire and Ficonflac. I'll show you some examples. These are dolphins that actually prey. They are looking for food. They don't occur in too many, in a group of too many dolphins out there. There are maybe 2 or 3 of them out there, and they're looking for food. This is a dolphin feeding on squid at Rivière Noire. And these are dolphins that are looking for a place to relax. This is what I'm going to show you in the next video. How relaxing dolphins spend their time in the waters of Ficonflac. We have 2 species of dolphins in Mauritius that have been well documented. We have one called the bottlenose dolphin from the species Tertium. And then we have the second one, and this is the second one. We call them the spinner dolphin, Stenella longirostris. Well, these guys occur in hundreds when they go out to rest. And this is one while we're studying, we're doing surveys, so we came across them and we spend time so they go from the surface to the deeper water, like 15, 20 meters, play together and spend some time, like these are like 15, 20 meters deep. They roam around, and this is one group of, let's say, tens of them. And then there are several such groups. They try not to be, appear too much in bigger groups that predators can attack them. They can be spotted easily, but they enjoy the company of their teammates. And then they go up. They travel up. They go to the surface. I'm at the surface here. They go up straight. Here we are with the dolphins. So these are social animals. They like to socialize, live in groups. They communicate using echolocation, and they produce sounds. And these sounds actually clicks in the form of clicks, and they use it as echolocation, send the sound, and then when the sound comes back to them, they capture it and produce images. This is how they communicate. So this is another organism that we've been studying in Malaysia, the green sea turtle. There are 6 of them that are resident to a seagrass patch, very huge one. Lots of tourists, they come and they keep the distance that they need to. And this guy is a guide that you've just seen, and we are trying to look at these guys. And there are the patches that you see, brown patches. These are seagrass patch here. And they also help the tourism sector, create jobs, and they are well concerned. There are regular checks happening there. Now, what do we do with all these research? You know, the main currency of a marine scientist is not the dollars, the pounds. They will come. But the main currency is actually your scientific publications, your reports that you write to decision makers. So all this work done, for example, in Ishigaki Island in Japan, in the Antarctic, they take the shape of scientific reports which are peer reviewed by our expert colleagues, and they declare them reliable and good to be made public. And this goes out in public and people read them. Though they are in the scientific language, we also tend to write them into more layman language for other people to read them through newspaper articles, newsletter articles, and so on. So basically, we not only do research for our own sake, like I mentioned to you, yeah, I'm curious about it, but I'm passionate to help the society as well, not only to just look at these beautiful corals out there, but we produce papers, scientific reports with the results that can be used by decision makers, but we also build capacities, like we produce graduate students, master philosophy students, PhD students, doctor philosophy students that will later on this research in turn. So basically, these are our research outputs, and this is what we give to our funders who fund us using taxpayers' money, or private sector money, and they have the output. So I hope I have convinced you what a marine scientist do, or marine biologist specifically do. And the question I have for you is, would you like to be one of them one day, or are you already one of them? I tend to think that share the thinking of Andre Gide. Man cannot discover new oceans unless he has the courage to lose sight of the shore. And this is a study we're doing in Karimunjawa Islands with sharks. Not all sharks are dangerous. The black tip sharks that we have, also in Mauritius, of course. But then this is a study place dedicated to sharks on Karimunjawa Islands. So with this, I would like to thank the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center and the University of Mauritius for this opportunity. The director and Mr. Jan's team to make this possible. Our MPhil PhD students who have contributed to all these slides. It's not only my work, my ex-PhD students and local universities collaborators. With this, I thank you. And I leave the floor to Mr. Jan now.
Thank you, Dr. Bhagooli, for this inspiring and insightful presentation. My first question to you is, where do I sign in to become a marine biologist? Because I saw you swimming with the dolphins and everything. It seems amazing. Thank you.
So many options.
Without further ado, we'll now proceed to the question and answer section. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions in the question and answers box on your interface marked with a Q&A. While you're busy typing your question, I have a question for Dr. Bhagooli. So, Dr. Bhagooli, tell me, what is your most memorable on-field experience of a career? I mean, which one was the most amazing?
Well, this is a difficult question because every time I get into water, my brain functions like I'm going to see something very interesting today, and that's the bait for me to go out in the field. Or when I'm running an experiment, the results that will come out, I'm excited about it. But to answer your question simply, my experience to Antarctica through the Australian Research Council funding was a mind-blowing experience. I'm someone from the tropics, and I got the chance to study microalgae living in the ice and the bottom of the ice. So I had 3 weeks of training on the mountains in Australia, in Tasmania, to go out for the field there. So it's more than the skills of doing science. We have to survive in extreme environment. Like in the tropical environment, we have to dive. So my experience in Antarctica, where we have to leave the Australian base for 2 days, 48 hours, and go to our research site there and pitch a tent with all our equipment there to make our own food, breakfast and dinner, and spend 48 hours away. And we have to radio every 6 hours to the station because there the meteorological services cannot tell us about the weather patterns. We have to get out of our tent every morning and every evening at 6 and report back to the station. So it was like a life experience to be working and conducting research in Antarctica. and using our scientific skills, but learning new skills to work in the extreme environment. And the team living there of 16 people, they were like one family, because you have to be an engineer whenever you're needed to be. You have to be an assistant to the doctor. I spent time doing aquaponics. I spent time fixing electrical problems. I spent time going out for rescue when our other colleagues are conducting research. And the best thing out there was to go to that site, Vostok, which you can only see less than your palm's distance. And you have to drill 250 meters of ice there with a team to do geological studies. That was amazing for me and mind-blowing. So just being born on an island surrounded by the ocean doesn't mean that you're isolated from the rest of the world. Marine science connects you to the rest. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Dr. Bhagooli. There's someone in the chat asking, what would you advise to someone holding an undergraduate degree in conservation/bioecology who wants to work in the field of marine science? Is the pathway undertook still recommended in 2020?
Yeah, of course, my answer is definitely yes. As a marine scientist, you're not marketable only to the local job market. You know, with such a degree in marine science, you can move to the African continent, you can move to Europe, you can go to, as I've been to Antarctica. I could have stayed in Australia. I chose to come back to my country and to serve my country. That's my personal choice. But with a degree in marine science, you can go anywhere in the world, and there is high demand. Think of the Great Barrier Reef. I've been on the Great Barrier Reef. There are thousands of scientists working there, and bet you there are so many foreign scientists settled out there and doing their research and working for the Australian government, contributing to the global scientific community. So definitely the answer is yes, but do not limit yourself to one location to find a job. Be open-minded, like the sea. They connect all the sea is connected. It's not closed. Like we say for the land, we say it's landlocked, but the sea is open. It keeps mixing. There are so many currents that move us from one place to the other. So let's be like the sea if you want to be a marine scientist. Be open-minded, leave the doors open, be ready to adventure.
Thank you, Dr. Bhagooli. We have one more question, and I think our time will be up because we are short on time. The last question is, what are the possible impacts of an oil spill on ecology and the ecosystem in general?
Okay, I think this is an interesting question because, as I mentioned to you, when you talk of pollution, you usually go to a marine chemist. Of course, the physical oceanographers and the biological oceanographers work together. But looking at that, you have to first analyze what sort of pollutants you're talking of. So once you do that analysis from the water column, then you look at how they are going to be distributed using the physical oceanography technologies. And then you go to the marine biologist. What organisms are living there? Are they sedentary? Are they moving the water column? Can they escape that danger? Or they will be there at they will be at the mercy of what is falling to them, like the corals, like some territorial fish. So it is interesting of how, for example, an oil or grease will get distributed from a chemical perspective, from a physical perspective, and the biological impacts. And the biological impacts will be at two. You can look at it from two angles. You have the soluble things that dissolve in the water and reaches the organisms. And you have the insoluble part that we can see, the dark stuff that we can remove physically. So we have to study how far both the soluble and the insoluble aspect of that oil have spread in that region. And then how far they can start affecting these organisms. There are tools nowadays, non-destructive tools, like we use. I've used it in Sydney. We call them underwater fluorometer. It measures the photosynthetic functioning of sea plants, phytoplankton, corals, any photosynthesizing organism, and it can tell you whether the photosynthetic system is healthy or not. So by using that non-destructive diving fluorometer, you can actually map how far the insoluble aspect of the spot, which is affected by oil, has been touched. And based on that, you can plan your action. So marine scientists, they can do investigation, provide information, and then it's up to the authorities to use that and take decisions. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Dr. Bhagooli. Unfortunately, it seems our time for questions is up. Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up this session of today?
Yeah, I think the message that I want to send to my fellow colleagues and friends or students at the university, marine science, as you've seen, is a multidisciplinary field, and its application is huge. Being surrounded by sea, we need to go in this direction. We need to produce more capacity. It not only requires the scientific skills, but it also requires soft skills, like planning skills, going out in the field. It's not like on the eve we decide to go to the field and the next day we're in the field. It requires advanced planning. We require permits. We have to follow what the authorities have put at our disposition. It's all well thought. We have to follow those instructions and those protocols. And then we can go and explore and find new things. But the earlier you engage in this field, during my time, I embarked on marine science, technically speaking, at the master's level. Today we have O-level marine science subject being offered, A-level marine science. You have a wonderful setting of education that provides you with that opportunity. And these opportunities, if you grow earlier, you will advance further and you'll help the country move ahead in the endeavor to develop the blue economy. So that's my advice, and you're all welcome to join the marine science field. I thank you, Mr. Ian, and I also thank the audience, and last but not the least, the Rajiv Gandhi Center for this commendable effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhagooli, and thank you everyone for being here today. While I have your attention and before you leave, I would be grateful if you could give us a feedback on today's session by filling a form that I will need to do in some seconds in the chat. Just give me 1 minute. There you go. Please follow the link in the chat and give us feedback on today's session. Don't forget to look us up on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center website. We regularly post science-related contents for your enjoyment. I hope you enjoyed this webinar session. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, goodbye.